Let's talk about all this on our roundtable, joined by our political analyst Matthew Dowd, GOP strategist, CNBC contributor Sarah Fagan, Democratic Congressman André Carson, Republican Congressman Tom Cole, and Jennifer Palmieri, who served as communications director for Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Welcome to you all. And Matt, let's begin. Constant news over the weekend on this executive order. You saw that refusal of a stay early this morning. But this is shaping up to be a real showdown between the administration and the courts. Very good chance it'll go all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I'm just stepping back a little bit. I mean, we're drowning in tweets, and we're thirsty for some sense of wisdom. And I think this is part of the problem when you have a president who's all about action and not about reflection or contemplation in any of this. So he gets himself involved in a situation where it's basically unvetted policy that gets put out there that has many constitutional problems in the course of this. When he needs victories and when he needs to convince the public that he's actually going to rule or lead in a unified way, and every part of this continues to divide the country.
Yeah, there's I think an appreciation by his supporters that he is aggressive and moving quickly, and the spirit of what he's trying to do is prudent. But the way it was executed was so poorly that it makes it harder for him to bring people together to try to implement policy. I mean, the thing that, you know, when you're in an administration, particularly early in the stages, and you're trying to work with Congress, you've got to think every action has an impact down the road. And he needs to be doing things now that bring people together and not divide them, and he's not doing that.
Well, and Congressman Carson, I wonder if now, based on that tweet we saw yesterday about the so-called judge, now if he gets a court to agree with him, it raises the question, are they bowing to pressure from the executive branch?
Well, in this case, thank God for the founding fathers who set up 3 separate branches of government and the Media Act and as the 4th estate. I mean, his impulsivity concerns me. He's fanning the flames of xenophobia and Islamophobia, and the American people are speaking out against it.
Congressman?
Look, I think we've had 2 presidents in a row that tried to unite the American people, and both of them failed, quite frankly. I think this president's decided he's going to get things done. That's going to be his measuring rod. And it was a bumpy rollout of the executive order, no doubt about it. They had to make changes afterwards, which goes to Matthew's point. They hadn't thought all of it through. But the basic point about being worried about these specific countries, being concerned about the security of the American people, and frankly, it polls pretty well if you wanted to use that as a measure. I think, look, he's had an interesting opening 2 weeks, but I think he's going to be a lot more effective than most people give him credit for.
Jennifer?
There's a lot of process and style problems, but I think we should step back and note that he campaigned as a demagogue and he's presiding as a demagogue. And if you were setting out to have that be what your presidency was about, he has taken all the steps to do that. So at a substantive level, we should all be very concerned. In terms of how they're operating the White House, I understand they had this chaos theory. This is just chaos. A good chaos theory means you have a disciplined strategy behind the scenes of how you're going to roll out policy, and then you do it in a way that inflicts chaos on the press and your opponents. But what they have done here is just chaos. And I understand that they're doing what their base wanted and they're keeping their base content.
We're in the promise-keeping business, you heard Vice President say.
Right, but what their problem is doing that, first of all, they're doing it badly. It's bad policy, too. But they are igniting, on our side, they are igniting an opposition and passion in the opposition that we have never seen in this country.
Well, I think they're
more so than the Tea Party.
Here's I think a huge problem that we exist today. First, they've misread the election, in my view. That Donald Trump and have misread. They think that the majority of the country is with them on these things.
Maybe they don't care. Maybe they care about having their base solid, and that's enough to get through their policies.
Well, here's the problem. That exists as long as Republicans don't start eventually peeling away, which will ultimately happen. It's happened to other Republican presidents when they lost a big part of support. But my concern is this: is much of these policies are based on the fears of his base instead of the facts elements of this. And Ben Franklin said once, and I'm speaking of this executive power, Ben Franklin said, if you give up freedom to get security, you deserve neither. And in this case, there is no connected the dots to the 7 countries he chose. There's no real connect the dots in the realm of this. And I have to say, everybody can say this isn't a Muslim ban. It is a Muslim ban. If I campaigned to say I want to keep the Irish out of the country, and then when I became president I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep people of Ireland out of the country, everybody would know what it is.
Oh, that's not the case. I mean, look, we have over 40 countries, majority Muslim countries, that aren't affected by this at all. If you look at these 7 countries, ISIL is in a big part of those 7 countries. countries. You look at the governments, they mostly can't cooperate with us, even if they want to, and certainly in the case of Iran, they don't. You've got state sponsors of terrorism. Suggest this is a Muslim ban, that's just wrong.
It's absolute.
But here's the thing.
Trump has a lot of business interest in many of the countries who are not on the list. How do you explain that?
Would you build businesses in Syria today? Would you build them in Somalia
has a single
today?
terrorist,
Yeah,
has a single terrorist,
That is egregiously.
Tom,
you have no basis.
Tom, is a
to make
single
that
terrorist
It's not
from
a
one of
bad
those
law.
7 countries committed an act in the United States?
By that definition, I guess we should, any country that has, you want
Look,
them under a ban?
So why isn't
look-
Saudi
There is
Arabia
risk.
under the
Because
ban?
you look at places where governments aren't functioning and can't help you vet people.
He can't-
You think we can adequately vet people in Syria?
He
Do you?
campaigned on a temporary Muslim ban. That's what he campaigned
He
on.
also pulled back
Look,
from that.
there are
during
risks
the
in
course
those
of the
countries,
campaign.
but the bigger challenge for him, I think, is if you sort of step back and you think about the last 10 days. It's in many ways been the best of Trump and the most challenging of Trump's actions.
And the best, you're saying
the Supreme Court, you know, from the great tactical move in the campaign of releasing the list and bringing conservatives to his side to the execution of a terrific judge, it's been a great period of time for him. And at the same time, you have this travel ban going on. And the confluence of these two things, could make it such that he puts Gorsuch in a much worse position, because if we end up in the Supreme Court on this travel ban, the politics of the court confirmation process, which is the most important thing to Donald Trump's base, the most important thing. And that's, to me, where the administration needs to step back and think more strategically and
that's
more
exactly
broadly.
where Senator
They
Schumer
could have waited 3 weeks or a month on this travel ban if it was that important to them.
But I'm going to bring what you said about Judge Gorsuch to Jennifer. This is putting Democrats in a bit of a tough spot. Here's a judge who got a 99-0 voice, basically a voice vote confirmation. He's got the support of liberals like Neil Katyal. And then what the Republicans are saying is it's up to the Democrats to decide whether you're going to pull that nuclear trigger or not and change the rules on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think that Democrats have to pull all the way back and have a theory of the case about how they're going to be in opposition to this president. And I think they have an enormous burden on them, and they can't get. I think they should follow the rules of our democracy. The founders put good guardrails in place, and they need to follow the rules, but they should not follow convention. So
what does that mean?
So that means they resist, but that's different than obstructing. So I think they have to do everything that is allowed under the Constitution, everything that's allowed under Senate rules, to hold Trump accountable, to try to ferret out what this judge might really think about presidential powers. Whatever is in front of them, they have to push to the furthest spot that's allowed under the law, and that means not following convention. Convention would say that a president gets to pick their cabinet, and you largely defer to them. But in this case, when you have someone like Ben Carson who says, I don't think I'm qualified for the job, when you have somebody like Governor Perry who wanted to get rid of the department he's supposed to head, they shouldn't be confirmed. They can't get caught up in how Republicans acted or how Democrats did it under President Bush. They have got to be as aggressive as possible in defending our democracy.
I mean, Washington always has a high level of hypocrisy, right? But I think the level of hypocrisy that has come out of the United States Senate on both sides of the aisle is amazing. So we have a Senate that basically Republicans didn't allow a vote on Merrick Garland, who was approved on his Court of Appeals by a majority of...
Some Democrats say that's reason enough not to fill the court.
Well, and I don't agree with that. So I think Republicans should have voted. It's their job to vote. It's their job to hold hearings and their job to vote and let the votes fall where they may. I think the Democrats, they ought to say, we're going to do an extreme vetting on this, but we're going to put this up to a vote. It's going to be a vote, and that's what the Constitution says. That's what the rule is, and you can't keep changing the rules based upon who holds political power.
You don't have a vote. Where do you stand on this question?
I agree to some degree. I think that this is a great lesson in civics for the American people. People are weighing in, but I actually share his opinion.
Yeah, I think Democrats are in a real pickle on this one because of the qualifications and the impeccable standards by this judge is being viewed by nearly everybody who's ever worked with him, Democrat or Republican alike. And so, Chuck Schumer, trying to play the obstructionist, has 9 Democrats up for election in 2018 in states that Donald Trump won, 5 of whom won by somewhere between 19 and 21 points in these states. Is he going to drive these folks off a cliff.
But it is a little bit
As-
hypocritical for the Republicans to talk about the Democrats' obstruction after they did what they did.
But it is a completely different situation, Matt, in that, one, you're in the final year of an administration, and two, you know, Republicans control the Senate.
They just didn't. I mean, it was a year out. It was a year out. It was a full
in a very
year for
politicized.
President Biden. But that shouldn't matter. This in terms of the merits of whether how you fill the
but with all
court.
due respect, you know, President Obama, when he was in the Senate, tried to filibuster a Supreme Court nominee. You know, Vice President Biden laid out the idea that you shouldn't bring anybody in the last year, particually if it would tilt the
That's
balance
right.
of the court.
Yeah, they didn't say don't meet with the guy. They didn't
I actually want to pose a slightly different question. You know, it's playing off what Matt was saying, what you were saying about the polls earlier. Do you think this White House is looking at the polling in a conventional way? And how is it going to affect Republican members of Congress like you? If he sticks it in the 40s or below on his overall popularity rating, how much does that matter to you and your colleagues? Or is what's more important where he stands in your district?
Well, if you're just going to look at it politically, I think your district's always more important, or your state. And the reality is, if he's in the mid-40s, that means probably among the people that voted for me, he's in the 80s. So you don't look at it in terms of the overall electorate. You look at it in terms of your own position, if that's the driving factor. It shouldn't be, but it's always something that politicians, by their very nature, take into consideration.
You think that's going to be the ultimate decider?
Well, as I said the other day to you, George, to me, polls are like, approval ratings for presidents are like an offensive line, right? And if an offensive line is weak, that means the defense is empowered and emboldened, and they're going to come and blitz, and they're going to come and try to disrupt the quarterback, and they're going to do that. I think Tom is right, as until Donald Trump's numbers start deteriorating in a serious way among Republicans, it won't matter, those polls won't matter until that happens.
You are seeing, go ahead.
3/4 of our conference has never served with a Republican president. And they've never served with the president that could literally reach into their base and generate hundreds of telephone call and pressure. His position is, amongst Republicans, is very powerful. He'll have a pretty good opening
I guess
year.
the question is going to be, what will the difference that Jennifer was talking about earlier, that you're seeing these protests crop up pretty spontaneously around the country.
Yeah.
How powerful is that going to be?
Well, I think I agree with Matt. You know, if it's just on the left, if it's just a Democratic Tea Party, it's probably not going to dissuade the administration from taking any action it wants to put forth. If it starts to come from Republicans, if you start to see, you know, senators like, you know, Ben Sasse, who was very respectful, but also, you know, just earlier on in the program, you know, was quick to condemn some of Donald Trump's comments. If you start to see that among a majority of the Senate, among many members of the House, among the Republican base and conservative writers, it's going to get a lot harder for them to accomplish what they want to.
See that coming?
I think we're seeing a lot of buyer's remorse as we speak. Vice President Pence mentioned the first few weeks of action. I think we're seeing the first few weeks of disaster and distraction. More and more independents, more and more libertarians, more and more Republicans are saying, I actually voted for this guy. He does not represent my values.
That is going to have to be the last word today. Thank you all very much. We'll be right back.